They said I was wasting my life before they even knew who I really was. My name is Elena, I'm 29 years old, and if you've ever felt underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you, then my story will feel painfully familiar. But before I continue, I need to ask you something important. Please hit that subscribe button right now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one, and it means more than you can imagine. Because the truth is, every time you subscribe, you're not just supporting me, you're proving that stories like mine matter. Don't wait. Do it now. Subscribe, like, and join me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see family forever. My grandmother was the one who led the charge against me. She wasn't just the elder of the family. She was the voice everyone respected, the matriarch whose opinion was treated like law. And from the very beginning, she made it clear that she didn't believe in me. She laughed at my job, laughed at the hours I spent on my computer, laughed at the small contracts I was building online. To her, it wasn't work. It was a phase, a waste of time, something she loved to mock whenever relatives gathered. Elena thinks she's working, she'd say with a cruel smile, but all she's doing is wasting electricity. The words always landed like knives, and the table would erupt in laughter. My uncles chuckled, my cousins smirked, even my parents shook their heads with weary disappointment. No one defended me. No one said a word in my favor. I was the family's punchline. But what they didn't know was that behind my silence, I was building something. Every late night staring at my glowing screen, every project I finished, every small win that no one celebrated, they were laying the foundation for a future bigger than anything my grandmother could imagine. I wasn't worthless. I was becoming unstoppable. Still, the humiliation never stopped. Every holiday dinner was another performance, another round of jokes at my expense. Every eye roll and sigh was another reminder that to them, I would never be enough. And my grandmother, sitting at the head of the table with her sharp tongue and mocking eyes, made sure of it. But what none of them knew, what I didn't even know back then, was that Grandma's laughter was hiding something much darker. She wasn't just cruel with her words. She was hiding secrets. Secrets about money that had mysteriously vanished. Secrets about choices she had made that left our family broke. And one day soon, the truth would come out. The very woman who mocked me for being worthless was the real reason our lives were falling apart. The cracks in our family's foundation began quietly, like hairline fractures on glass that no one notices until it shatters. At first, it was little things: overdue utility bills, tense whispers in the kitchen when they thought I wasn't listening, sudden changes in plans because money was tight this month. I wanted to believe it was temporary, that every family went through rough patches. But something about it felt off. My parents worked hard, or at least that's what I thought. My father held on to his job at the local plant. My mother still managed part-time hours at the school cafeteria, and even with debts, we'd always been able to keep afloat. But now, it was as if money evaporated the moment it entered the house. Groceries seemed scarcer, dinners smaller, and the usual family treats, Grandma's insistence on hosting a feast every Sunday, grew thinner with each passing week. And yet, no matter how thin things got, Grandma never stopped laughing at me. She'd sit in her chair, her voice carrying through the room like it was the final word in every conversation. If Elena spent half as much time working as she does pretending on that computer, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. Her eyes would dart around the room, daring anyone to disagree. No one did. They just nodded, sighing in disappointment, their gazes quietly shifting toward me as if I was the one responsible for all of it. The irony stung. I wasn't draining the family. In fact, I had my own small account tucked away from years of freelancing, modest but growing. I bought my own clothes, covered my own phone bill, and never asked for help. Meanwhile, The house was drowning in bills no one seemed willing to explain. One evening, I overheard my father's voice break as he whispered to my mother in the kitchen. "The mortgage, I don't know how much longer we can cover it." My mother's reply was hushed, but the word, again, cut through the air like a blade. Again. As if this wasn't the first time money had disappeared where it shouldn't have. But when I asked about it, they brushed me off. "Don't worry about grown-up things," my mother said with a forced smile. "Focus on your job." She said the word like it tasted sour. Grandma, of course, didn't waste the opportunity. "See? Even your mother knows. That work of yours is nothing. If you want to help this family, get a real job." Her words echoed long after dinner ended. Something wasn't adding up. We weren't broke because of me. We weren't struggling because of my so-called worthless job. The truth was hidden somewhere else, and deep down, I could feel it pulsing beneath the surface. I didn't know it yet, but the trail of missing money would lead straight back to the woman laughing at me the loudest. Money doesn't just vanish. At least, that's what I used to believe. Numbers had always made sense to me. What you earned, what you spent, what you saved. But in my family's house, it was as if money was made of smoke. You'd see it in one moment, and in the next, it had slipped through the cracks, leaving only the faintest trace of its existence. It started with the emergency jar. My father had always kept a metal tin on the top shelf of the pantry, tucked behind cans of soup. It wasn't much. Just a few bills here and there, meant for unexpected groceries or gas when paychecks came late. One night, while reaching for rice, I noticed the tin was gone. When I asked my mother, she stiffened. "We used it," she said too quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Your father needed it for bills." But later that week, I overheard my father asking her why she had emptied it without telling him. My chest tightened. Someone wasn't telling the truth. The missing jar wasn't the only sign. Bank envelopes arrived, thicker than usual, with red stamped warnings flashing across the paper. Yet when I brought it up, my parents dismissed it with nervous smiles. "Don't worry about grown-up problems," my mother repeated, as though the phrase was rehearsed. And then there was Grandma. She had always been quick to mock me, but now her sharp tongue grew crueler. Every time I sat with my laptop, she made a show of sighing, shaking her head, muttering about my imaginary paycheck. But what struck me wasn't just her cruelty, it was how defensive she became whenever money was mentioned. One afternoon, I asked an innocent question. "Grandma, do you know why Dad's been so worried about bills lately?" Her eyes snapped to mine, sharper than I'd ever seen them. "Are you accusing me of something?" Her voice cut through the room, louder than necessary. I hadn't accused her at all, but her reaction was like fire doused with gasoline. "No," I said quickly, startled by her intensity. "I was just—" "Don't you dare stick your nose where it doesn't belong," she interrupted, her hands trembling as she gripped her teacup. "Focus on your fake little job and leave the real issues to grown-ups." Her words left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just anger, it was fear. For the first time, I realized Grandma wasn't mocking me just to humiliate me. She was mocking me to distract me, to keep me small, to stop me from asking questions she didn't want answered. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The missing jar, the bank notices, Grandma's explosive reaction. Something was wrong, and no matter how hard she tried to silence me, I was determined to find out what she was hiding. The house had always been cluttered with relics of the past, old photo albums stacked in dusty boxes, chipped porcelain dolls lining shelves, yellowed letters tied with string. Grandma loved to call it family history, but to me, it was a maze of forgotten things. I never cared to dig through it, until the night I couldn't shake the thought that our missing money was hiding somewhere in the clutter. It started innocently. My mother asked me to help bring down some blankets from the attic. She said the cold was settling in and Grandma didn't like shivering at night. I climbed the rickety ladder, the wooden beams creaking under my weight, and stepped into the dim, musty air. The attic smelled of cedar and secrets, the kind of place where time seemed to hold its breath. As I rummaged through the boxes, something caught my eye. A small leather satchel tucked behind an old trunk, hidden almost deliberately. My instincts told me not to touch it, but curiosity pressed harder. I pulled it free, dust rising in the thin beam of light from the single attic window. Inside were papers, dozens of them, bills, loan agreements, receipts. At first glance, they looked harmless, but as I shuffled through them, my stomach twisted. Several were overdue notices, accounts in default, even letters threatening foreclosure. All of them were in Grandma's name. My hands trembled as I read further. Some of the debts weren't just hers. They were linked to my parents' accounts. There were strange signatures, sloppy but familiar, as if someone had forged my father's name. I felt my pulse quicken. Had Grandma been borrowing money in his name? The deeper I dug, the worse it became. Receipts for gambling halls I had never known she visited. Checks written to names I didn't recognize. Transactions that explained exactly why money had been vanishing like smoke. I sat frozen on the attic floor, my breath shallow. The truth was there, in my hands. Grandma wasn't just cruel with her words. She was bleeding us dry, draining every last drop of stability from the family while mocking me as the problem. The creak of the attic ladder snapped me out of my daze. Grandma's voice echoed up the steps. "Elena, what's taking you so long?" My heart jumped into my throat. Hastily, I shoved the papers back into the satchel, sliding it behind me. The trap door creaked open, and her sharp eyes appeared, scanning the room. For a moment, they landed on me, narrow and suspicious. "Find the blankets?" she asked, her tone too casual. "Yes," I lied, holding up a folded quilt as if it had been my only task. My voice shook, but I forced a smile. She studied me for a second too long before nodding. "Good girl. Don't go digging around in things you don't understand." As she disappeared back down the ladder, I clutched the quilt against my chest, my heart racing. Now I knew the truth. The problem wasn't my job. The problem was Grandma. The quilt still felt heavy in my arms long after I climbed down from the attic. But it wasn't the fabric weighing me down. It was the truth. The papers, the loans, the gambling receipts. They were burned into my mind like fire. My legs trembled as I reached the bottom of the stairs, every creak echoing louder than the last. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hold up the satchel and shout, "Look, here it is. This is why we're broke." But fear clamped down on my throat. If I revealed it too soon, without the right words, without the right moment, they would dismiss me. They always dismissed me. So instead, I carried the quilt to Grandma's room, laying it neatly at the foot of her bed. She was there, rocking in her chair, knitting with that same calm authority she always carried. Her eyes flicked up at me, studying me the way a hawk studies its prey. "Good," she said simply, as if the conversation in the attic hadn't happened. "Now go do something useful. Useful." That word echoed like poison. All my life, she had told me my work wasn't useful, that I wasn't useful. And yet here she was, the one who had drained us dry. My stomach turned as I left the room, her laughter faintly following me down the hall. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bank letters, the forged signatures, the receipts stained with guilt. My family was drowning, and it wasn't because of my so-called worthless job. It was because of her. The next morning, I made a choice. I would confront my parents. We sat at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air. My father's face was lined with exhaustion, my mother's eyes dull with worry. I waited until their coffee cups were half empty before speaking. Dad, Mom, I need to tell you something. About Grandma. My mother stiffened immediately, her hand pausing mid-air with the spoon. My father frowned, glancing toward the living room where Grandma's voice hummed softly to the radio. What about her? He asked cautiously. I swallowed hard. She's the reason we're broke. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. My father's brow furrowed. My mother set her spoon down with a clink. Elena, she said softly, a warning in her tone. Don't start. I'm not starting anything, I insisted. My hands shook as I leaned forward. I found papers in the attic. Bills, loans, receipts, all in her name. Some with your signatures. Forged, Dad. She's been hiding it, draining us, and blaming me every step of the way. My father's face paled, but not with belief, with anger. You're accusing your grandmother of theft? Of forgery? Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling but firm. That's exactly what I'm saying. My mother shook her head, her eyes filling with disappointment. Elena, do you hear yourself? Your grandmother has been holding this family together for decades. She sacrificed for us, raised you, gave you a roof over your head, and you're blaming her because we're struggling? I'm not blaming her without proof, I snapped. I saw the papers, I touched them. They were hidden in the attic. Papers can mean anything, my father shot back. You probably misread them. You spend so much time on that computer of yours. You think you're smarter than everyone else. The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to scream, to drag them upstairs and shove the satchel in their faces. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Grandma's shadow loomed too large over them. They trusted her more than they would ever trust me. As if on cue, Grandma entered the kitchen, her steps steady, her eyes sharper than knives. What's this noise? She asked, her voice deceptively calm. Elena thinks you're responsible for our money troubles, my father said bitterly. For a second, I thought I saw it, a flicker of fear in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the same mocking smile I had known all my life. Oh, Elena, she chuckled, shaking her head, always spinning stories, always looking for someone else to blame for her own failures. My parents' eyes shifted back to me, full of doubt. Grandma walked past us, placing a gentle hand on my mother's shoulder, her voice dripping with poison sweetness. You poor things. Don't let her nonsense worry you. She doesn't understand how the world works. That little hobby of hers has made her bitter. My chest burned. It's not a hobby, I said through clenched teeth, and I'm not lying. But no one believed me. The conversation ended there, my father shaking his head, my mother looking at me as though I had betrayed them. And Grandma? She smiled. She won. That night I sat alone in my room, the glow of my laptop casting shadows on the walls. Rage coursed through me, but so did something else. Determination. They could laugh, they could dismiss me, they could side with her. But the truth was mine, and I wasn't going to let it stay buried. I knew what I had seen, and one day, the rest of them would have no choice but to see it too. The breaking point didn't come with a loud crash. It came slowly, relentlessly, like waves wearing down a stone until all that was left were cracks too deep to ignore. At first, it was the electricity bill. The lights flickered more often, and my mother whispered about extensions. My father snapped when I asked why he kept rubbing his temples every night after work. Don't you have something better to do than ask questions? He muttered, but his voice cracked in a way that betrayed the truth. The bills were suffocating him. Then came the car. It was old, but it was my father's lifeline to work. One morning, I watched from the window as a tow truck rolled away with it, the sound of chains rattling through my chest like a warning bell. He stood in the driveway, his shoulders slumped, saying nothing as the neighbors peeked through their blinds. The shame was everywhere. It clung to the walls of the house, seeped into every conversation, stretched across every meal where silence replaced laughter. And through it all, Grandma sat in her chair, her voice the loudest, her presence impossible to ignore. This family wouldn't be falling apart if Elena had chosen a real career, she announced one evening as we ate in near darkness, the single bulb above the table buzzing weakly. But no, she thinks sitting on a computer counts as work. Look where that's gotten us. Her words hit harder now than they used to, because they were wrapped in the sharp sting of truth the others believed. My father slammed his fist against the table. She's right. Maybe if you'd done something respectable, Elena, we wouldn't be here. I stared at him, my throat burning. Dad, I'm not the reason the car was repossessed. I'm not the reason the bank is sending letters every week. You think I don't see them? You think I don't hear you whispering at night? His face hardened, but his eyes flickered with guilt. He didn't answer, and Grandma, she smiled. That cruel, satisfied smile that told me she knew she had them exactly where she wanted. Days bled into weeks, and the collapse only accelerated. The house was the next target. Notices arrived, stamped in red, warnings that our mortgage was months behind. My mother cried quietly in the kitchen while Grandma scolded her. Tears don't pay bills. If only Elena had been smart enough to become a nurse or a teacher, something real. Instead, she chose fantasy. I wanted to scream, to shove the satchel of papers into their faces, to force them to see the truth. But the memory of their disbelief still burned in my chest. If I pushed too hard, they would only retreat deeper into Grandma's shadow. So I waited. And as I waited, I watched. I watched the way Grandma's hands shook whenever she opened the mail before slipping it quickly into her purse. I watched how she avoided my eyes when I entered the room, as if afraid I would see through her. I watched how her mocking laughter grew louder whenever the silence of fear pressed too heavily on the family she was hiding, and the collapse was her fault. I knew it. The day the bank representative came to the door was the day everything shattered. He was polite but firm, explaining in a crisp voice that if payments weren't made, foreclosure proceedings would begin. My father stood frozen. My mother sobbed, and Grandma stepped forward, waving her hand as though she could command the man into silence. "We'll handle it," she snapped, her voice trembling, but we all knew we couldn't. That night, the family gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was heavy, the walls pressing in around us. My father broke first. "We're ruined," he whispered, his face pale. "I don't know what else to do." And then, as if on cue, Grandma shifted the blame. "You know what to do," she said firmly, her eyes piercing me. "Stop pretending Elena's little hobby is enough. She needs to step up, get a real job, start paying back what she owes this family." My mouth fell open. "What I owe? Are you serious?" "Yes," she hissed. "All these years of wasting time, draining us with your nonsense, and now we're paying the price. You've brought nothing but shame into this house." Something in me snapped. "No," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "I'm not the reason we're broke. I've been paying my own way for years. I've bought my own clothes, covered my own bills, even saved while you—" I stopped myself before saying it, but the words trembled on my lips. "Even while you've been the one stealing from us." Grandma narrowed her eyes, her lips curving into that bitter smile. She knew what I was about to say. She knew I had seen the papers. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She would rather burn the entire family down than admit the truth. The collapse was here. The car was gone. The house was slipping away. My parents were drowning. And yet they still looked at me as if I were the problem, because that's what Grandma had trained them to believe. But I knew better. I knew who the real thief was, and soon the rest of them would know too. The walls of our home had always been old, but lately they felt as though they were caving in. Paint peeled, ceilings leaked, and the air itself seemed heavy with the weight of despair. Every corner carried whispers of unpaid bills, every room echoed with the silence of things unsaid. It was strange to watch my family crumble. For years they had carried themselves with pride, even arrogance. My father was once the man who believed he could solve anything with his hands, fixing broken furniture or stubborn engines in the garage. My mother had been the woman who always found a way to put dinner on the table, even when money was scarce. And Grandma? She was the queen of the house, the matriarch whose voice no one dared question. Now, all of that power was gone. My father rarely spoke, sitting at the table with papers spread before him, his face hollowed by sleepless nights. My mother cried more openly now, no longer hiding in the kitchen but weeping at the dinner table, her hands shaking as she clutched unopened envelopes. And Grandma? She still sat in her chair like a ruler, her knitting needles clicking with false composure, but even she couldn't disguise the fear in her eyes. The collapse wasn't coming anymore. It was here. The mortgage was months behind, utilities were threatening shutoffs, and the food in the pantry had dwindled to cans of beans and stale bread. The shame of it pressed down on all of us, but somehow, the blame still found its way back to me. One evening, as the last of the daylight bled through the blinds, my father broke the silence. "We can't do this much longer," he muttered, staring at the stack of overdue notices in front of him. "We'll lose the house. Everything." My mother sobbed into her hands. "What will we do? Where will we go?" And then, as if on cue, Grandma spoke. Her voice was calm, but her words were daggers. "What we'll do is stop pretending Elena's little hobby is enough. If she had chosen a respectable path, maybe we wouldn't be here." Her words landed like blows, sharper because my parents didn't argue. They looked at me, their eyes heavy with disappointment, as if they too believed her lies. I clenched my fists under the table. "I am not the reason we're broke. You know that. I've been supporting myself. I've never asked for a dime. You want to know who's been bleeding us dry? Look at her." I nodded toward Grandma. The room froze. My mother gasped. My father's eyes narrowed. "Elena," he warned, his voice shaking with both anger and exhaustion, but I didn't back down. "You think it's me because she tells you it's me, but I've seen the papers, the loans, the debts, the gambling receipts. She's the one draining us. She's the reason we're losing everything." Grandma's knitting needles stilled in her lap. Her eyes flicked up to mine, cold and sharp. "Lies," she hissed. "Ugly little lies from a girl who can't accept her own failures." "Failures?" I snapped, my voice breaking. "The only one who hasn't failed here is me. I've built something while the rest of you let her tear us apart. And the worst part is, you'd rather believe her than believe your own daughter." My mother shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Elena, please, don't do this." But even through their denial, I saw it, a crack, a sliver of doubt. My father's eyes flickered with something that looked like fear. My mother's hands trembled harder than usual. And Grandma? Her face hardened, but the mask slipped for just a moment. She was terrified. Days passed, and the evidence piled higher. More letters came, each more urgent than the last. The bank threatened foreclosure. Debt collectors called daily. My parents, once so proud, whispered about borrowing from relatives, but even that hope was fleeting. No one wanted to shoulder the burden of a sinking ship. And slowly, reluctantly, they began to look at me differently. One night, my father approached me while I sat at my laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in his tired eyes. "What exactly do you do on that computer?" he asked, his voice hesitant. For years, he had dismissed my work as nothing more than playing pretend. But now there was desperation in his tone. I work, I said simply. Contracts, clients, deadlines, real money. He frowned. How much? I met his gaze. Enough to keep myself afloat. Enough that I've never needed your help. Enough that if you had listened instead of laughed, you would have seen I could have helped sooner. He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. The next morning, my mother came to me quietly, her eyes red from crying. Elena, she whispered, can you help us? Just a little? Until we figure things out? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that I had been offering help all along, that they had chosen to mock me instead of believe me. But instead, I nodded, because deep down, I had always known this moment would come. And the one who fought hardest against it? Grandma. The night she realized the family was turning toward me, her laughter grew harsher, her accusations louder. Don't you dare let her fool you, she snapped at my parents. She'll drag you down further. She's always been a burden. But the more she shouted, the less they seemed to believe her. For the first time, I wasn't the one they saw as the problem. For the first time, they were starting to realize that the person they had mocked, dismissed, and belittled might be the only one capable of saving them. And that terrified Grandma more than anything else. I had imagined many scenarios in my life where my family would finally see me. I pictured myself arriving one day in a sleek car, stepping out in clothes that screamed success, and watching their faces as they realized what I had become. I thought maybe I would reveal everything in a single dramatic moment. A signed contract, a large check, a headline with my name in it. But I never imagined this. I never imagined that the woman who had laughed at me, who had called me useless, who had mocked me until I felt smaller than a shadow, would one day be on her knees, begging me for help. It happened late one night. The house was nearly silent, but silence in my family's home was never peace. It was tension, fear, waiting. My parents had retreated to their room, exhausted by the weight of debts and sleepless nights. My father's shoulders had sagged permanently, and my mother's eyes had dulled from endless tears. I sat in the living room, the glow of my laptop spilling across the couch as I worked quietly, finishing another project that none of them understood. My fingers typed steadily, but inside, I was restless. I could feel the house collapsing around me like a dying star. And then I heard her. Grandma's footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the hall. She entered the room without speaking at first, her eyes catching the light from the screen. For once, there was no smirk, no mocking remark about wasting electricity. Her face was pale, lined with desperation, her hands trembling as they gripped the back of a chair. Elena, she said softly, too softly. I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard. She had never said my name like that before, not with gentleness, not with need. What is it? I asked cautiously. She pulled the chair closer, lowering herself into it with a heaviness that seemed to age her another 10 years in that moment. Her eyes, once so sharp and cruel, flickered with something I had never seen there before. Fear. We're losing everything, she whispered. I stared at her, searching her face for the trick, the manipulation. I know, I said coldly. I've been watching it happen. Her lips pressed together, trembling slightly. Your parents, they're breaking, Elena. They won't survive this. And, she hesitated, her eyes dropping to her lap. And neither will I. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was the same woman who had laughed at me in front of the whole family, who had poisoned their view of me for years, who had made me the scapegoat for every problem. And now she was sitting in front of me, admitting weakness. What do you want me to do? I asked finally, my voice sharp. Her eyes lifted to mine, glassy with unshed tears. "Help us. Help me." The words landed heavy, as if they had cost her more than she could bear. My chest tightened, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, satisfaction, sorrow, vengeance. I had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at everything broken beneath. "Help you?" I repeated. "After everything you've said to me? After everything you've done?" Her face hardened for a moment, the old grandma flashing through, but it dissolved quickly. "I was wrong," she admitted, though the words were strained. "I didn't understand your work. I thought it was nothing. But now—" She trailed off, her hands wringing together. "Now it's all we have." I let out a bitter laugh. "So now my worthless job suddenly matters?" Her silence was answer enough. I leaned back, my heart pounding. "You've spent years tearing me down, Grandma. Years telling them I was the problem, convincing everyone I wasn't enough. And now you want me to save you?" Her eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Yes." The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, every second stretching longer than the last. Part of me wanted to turn away, to let her drown in the ruin she had created. She had stolen, lied, and broken us. She had blamed me for her own sins, and the family had believed her. She didn't deserve my help. But another part of me, the part that had carried this family in silence for years, the part that still loved my parents despite everything, knew the truth. If I walked away, they would all collapse with her. "You should be begging them for forgiveness," I said finally, my voice low. "Not me." "I know," she whispered. Her tears finally spilled, running down the lines of her face. "But I can't. Not yet. They still believe in me. You're the only one who knows the truth. The only one who can stop this." Her admission cut deeper than I expected. For the first time, she acknowledged the power I held, the truth I carried. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you do it, Grandma? Why drain us? Why lie?" Her gaze fell to the floor. "Because I was afraid," she said softly. "Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being seen for what I really am. So I hid. I took. I laughed at you because it was easier than admitting the truth. And now?" She looked up at me, broken. "Now there's nothing left." I swallowed hard, my throat aching. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it hovered near mine. "Please, Elena, help us. Help me. Don't let everything we have disappear." For a moment, I just stared at her hand. The same hand that had pointed at me in accusation, that had waved me away in dismissal, that had guided the family's laughter against me. And now it shook with desperation. I didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "I'll think about it." Her shoulders sagged, relief and fear mixing in her expression. She nodded, wiping at her tears with trembling fingers. "That's all I ask." As she rose and left the room, her steps slow and uneven, I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest. She had begged. She had finally begged me. But the question still echoed in my mind. Was saving them worth saving her? The morning after Grandma's plea felt unreal. I had spent half the night replaying her words in my head. The image of her trembling hands burned into my memory. For years, she had stood over me like a storm cloud, her laughter thunder, her words lightning. And now, for the first time, she had bent. She had begged. But the question remained. What was I going to do about it? When I stepped into the kitchen that morning, my parents were already seated at the table. My father stared at the stack of bills like they were written in another language, and my mother's eyes were swollen from crying. Grandma sat in her chair, as always, but she didn't look at me. Her knitting needles lay idle on her lap, her hands folded tightly together as if holding herself in place. No one spoke as I poured myself coffee. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the creak of the chair as I sat down. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Elena," he said, his voice rough, "your grandmother tells me you might have a way to help." The words landed heavy. My eyes flicked to Grandma. She still wouldn't look at me. I took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch before answering. "I can help, but not the way you think." My mother leaned forward, desperate hope shining through her tears. "Anything, Elena. Please, whatever you can do. Just save the house. We can't lose this place." Her plea tore at me, but I knew this couldn't be about pity. Not anymore. If I was going to step in, it would be on my terms. I set the mug down, the sound sharp against the table. "If I help, things change, starting now." My father frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said firmly, "that I'm done being the scapegoat. I'm done being laughed at, dismissed, treated like I don't matter. If I step in, it's with full transparency. No more lies, no more secrets. I want access to everything: bills, debts, bank accounts. If I'm going to save this family, then I need to know exactly how deep the hole is." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only when Grandma finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were sharp, but behind the sharpness was fear. "You're asking for control." I met her stare. "Number, I'm demanding it." My parents exchanged uneasy glances. My father shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't argue. My mother nodded slowly, her lips pressed together as tears slid silently down her face. "And there's more," I continued, my voice steady. "When this is over, when we're back on our feet, I don't want to hear another word about my work being worthless. Not one. Because the truth is, my so-called pointless job is the only thing standing between us and ruin." Grandma's lips curled into a faint sneer. "You think you're strong enough to carry all of us?" "I already have been," I shot back. "The only difference is that now, you'll finally see it." Her face paled, and for the first time, she had no retort. My father rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. "If you can do this, Elena, if you can save us, then you'll have whatever access you need." It wasn't full acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall that had kept me locked out all my life. That night, I spread their bills across the living room floor. Envelopes, letters, red stamped warnings. They surrounded me like a battlefield. My parents watched nervously as I typed numbers into my laptop, building spreadsheets, calculating totals, mapping out what little chance we had of crawling back. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. The debts weren't just deep. They were suffocating. And yet, there was a path, narrow and grueling, but a path nonetheless. If I dedicated my income, if I pushed harder with my clients, if I leveraged the small network I had built, I could make a dent. Hours passed. The house was silent except for the sound of my typing. My parents dozed in their chairs, exhausted, but Grandma sat awake, watching me with those sharp, calculating eyes. Finally, she spoke. "You enjoy this, don't you? Sitting there, acting like the savior." I didn't look up. "I don't enjoy any of this, but someone has to clean up the mess you made." Her face tightened. "You have no proof it was me." I stopped typing, finally meeting her gaze. "Don't I? Because I saw the papers, Grandma. The loans, the forged signatures, the gambling receipts. I know exactly what you did." The color drained from her face, but she said nothing. And in that silence, I realized something. She wasn't just afraid of losing money. She was afraid of losing power. For years, she had ruled the family by controlling the narrative, by deciding who was worthy and who wasn't. Now, with me holding the truth, that power was slipping away. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm but firm. This is how it's going to be. I'll help. I'll keep us from losing everything. But from this day forward, the lies stop. The blame stops. And you, I paused, staring directly at her. You will never call me worthless again. Her lips parted, but no words came. My father stirred in his chair. My mother wiped her eyes, and the weight of my words filled the room like a verdict. I had always been the one sitting in silence while they laughed at me. But now, the silence was theirs. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless one at the table. For the first time, the power was mine. And I wasn't going to let it go. The living room was silent, the air so thick with tension it felt like I was breathing through glass. All the bills, the spreadsheets, the stacks of proof lay scattered across the coffee table. My laptop screen glowed faintly, still filled with numbers and columns that told the same truth I had known for weeks. Without me, this family had no chance. My parents sat across from me, their faces pale, lined with shame and exhaustion. They looked older than I remembered, as if the weight of the last few months had carved years into their skin. My father's hands, once strong enough to fix anything, trembled against his knees. My mother's eyes, once quick to find the silver lining, were hollow. And Grandma. She sat in her chair, her knitting needles absent from her lap, her posture stiff but fragile. She no longer looked like the matriarch who ruled the family with her laughter and her scorn. She looked small, weak, afraid. I took a deep breath, my chest heavy, my hands trembling as I folded them in my lap. "This ends now," I said quietly. No one moved. My voice, though soft, cut through the silence sharper than any scream could have. "For years," I continued, "I was the family's joke. I was the punchline at dinners, the one you all looked at with disappointment because Grandma told you I was worthless. Every time I worked late into the night, every time I saved my own money, every time I kept quiet when you mocked me, I was building something. Something you refused to see. And while you laughed, while you believed her lies, she was the one bleeding us dry." My father's eyes dropped to the floor. My mother sobbed quietly into her hands. I turned to Grandma. "You told them I was the reason we were broke. You convinced them my job meant nothing. But the truth is, you were the reason. You forged signatures. You gambled away money that wasn't yours. You drained us until there was nothing left. And when the walls closed in, you tried to bury me under the rubble." Her lips parted, but no words came. For once, she had nothing to say. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "If I help this family survive, it will be under my conditions. There will be no more secrets, no more lies. I will handle the finances. I will decide how we move forward. And you," I locked eyes with her, "will never laugh at me again." The silence stretched, heavy and final. Finally, my father nodded. "You're right," he whispered. His voice cracked, the weight of the words dragging it down. "We should have believed you. We should have seen you." My mother wiped her tears, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Elena. We let her decide who you were to us, and we were wrong." I swallowed hard, the words like balm and blade at the same time. Apologies couldn't undo years of pain, but they mattered. They meant that for once, they saw me. Grandma, however, said nothing. Her silence was louder than any denial, but the flicker of fear in her eyes told me the truth. She knew her reign was over. I stood, gathering the papers into a neat stack. This family will survive, because of me. And whether you like it or not, that's the truth you'll all have to live with. For the first time, I felt taller than Grandma in her chair. For the first time, her laughter no longer echoed in my head. That night, as I sat alone in my room, the glow of my laptop illuminating the walls, I let myself finally breathe. I had spent my life carrying the weight of being invisible, of being mocked, of being less. And now, I wasn't just visible, I was necessary. But more than that, I had rewritten the story they told about me. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't the joke. I was the reason they still had a chance. And as much as the victory felt hollow, as much as the wounds still stung, it was mine. If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, if you've ever been mocked, dismissed, or laughed at when all you wanted was to be seen, then you understand me. I shared my story not because it's easy, but because it's real. And I know there are people out there who feel the same pain, the same loneliness, the same longing for recognition. Please, if my story touched you, if it made you feel less alone, subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button, leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Every subscription means the world to me. It's not just a number. It's proof that stories like mine matter, that voices like mine deserve to be heard. Don't let my story vanish into silence like my family once let me vanish. Show me you see me. Show me you care. Subscribe, like, and share. Because maybe, just maybe, by standing together, we can make sure no one ever feels invisible again.